like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into something that's been in the news a lot lately.
Yeah.
Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. You might have seen some headlines about her hospitalization.
Yay.
We're going to be looking at all that.
Absolutely.
But also trying to find what else is interesting in this story. And what's really cool about this deep dive is it's all from one source.
Yeah, just one.
An Associated Press article
Uh-huh.
from December 13th, 2024.
Okay.
And the title is pretty straightforward. Nancy Pelosi hospitalized after she sustained an injury from fall on official trip to Luxembourg.
It does sound pretty straightforward at first glance, but there are some really interesting things to discuss once we get into it.
Definitely. So to kind of lay the groundwork, the article tells us that Pelosi, who's 84 years old, was on this official trip to Luxembourg.
And it was actually a really interesting trip. It wasn't just her. She was part of a bipartisan congressional delegation.
Mm-hmm.
Both Democrats and Republicans were there to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge during World War II.
Wow, what a significant trip. So how did this lead to her needing to go to the hospital?
Well, she tripped and fell
Oh, no.
during one of the events, and that led to a hip injury.
Ouch. That sounds really painful.
Yeah, and especially when you think about it, at 84,
Yeah,
a fall like that can be quite serious.
definitely.
So the injury needed medical treatment, and she had to cut her trip short because of it.
You know, it really makes you think about everything these public figures do, especially someone who has served as long as she has. All the traveling and the events and meeting people.
Right, constant pressure.
It's got to be a grueling schedule.
Oh, absolutely. And, age is definitely a factor.
Yeah,
But even younger politicians, they face intense pressure and scrutiny.
true.
And the toll it takes on them, both physically and mentally,
Yeah,
it's something that we don't always think about.
definitely. Now, the article goes on to talk about Representative Michael McCall, a Republican from Texas,
Yeah.
who was also a part of this delegation.
Oh, okay.
And he took to social media to express his concern and wish her a speedy recovery.
Right.
He even mentioned that they were together when the fall happened.
That's a really interesting detail because McCall, he's a pretty prominent figure in the Republican Party.
Uh-huh.
He's the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
Oh, wow.
So for him to come out and be so supportive of Pelosi
Yeah.
publicly like that, even though they have these political differences,
Right.
I think that's really significant.
It definitely is, especially given how divided things are politically these days.
Yeah.
Do you think there's more to it than just like a simple gesture of goodwill?
It's tough to say. Some people might just see it as a genuine human reaction.
Right.
Someone getting hurt.
Yeah.
But in the world of politics, everything can kind of be looked at as strategic.
Right.
So maybe he's trying to project an image of unity
Uh-huh.
after such a, really divisive election.
Mm-hmm. It makes you wonder if this type of display can change how the public views things, even if it's just for a little while.
It really could. When you see politicians from different parties being supportive of each other,
Right.
especially people who are just tired of all the partisan fighting,
Yeah.
it can really resonate with them.
Definitely.
In fact, the article even includes a photo
Oh, really?
of Pelosi and McCall holding hands during the trip.
Wow.
So it's a really striking image.
Yeah.
Because it contrasts so much with the things you usually hear coming from both sides.
So true. Do you think moments like these can actually start to heal some of these divisions? Or are they just temporary?
That's a hard question to answer.
Yeah.
I mean, these gestures can definitely give us some hope, but the truth is that those deep political differences,
Yeah.
they don't just disappear because of a handshake or a kind word.
It's easy to get caught up in how these moments look.
Yeah.
But you're right, we shouldn't read too much into them.
We really shouldn't. And, in the end, actions always speak louder than words.
Yeah.
So we need to see if this spirit of cooperation actually leads to any real policy changes and a willingness to compromise on the important issues.
So moving on from the actual incident itself, the article starts talking about Pelosi's current role in politics.
Okay.
She stepped down as House Speaker a couple years ago,
Yeah.
but it seems like she's not done yet.
No, she's definitely not. She's still a representative for her district
Right.
in San Francisco, and she's still a major force in the Democratic Party.
The article says she's still working with Democrats on different things, going to events, and even played a big part in convincing Biden to run for re-election this year.
It's amazing how much influence she still has, even though she doesn't have that official title anymore.
Right.
And it really makes you think about how former leaders Especially someone who was in such a powerful position for so long.
Right.
They can still really have a big impact on what happens in politics.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how she does it. Like, what are the things she does behind the scenes?
Right.
The article doesn't really go into much detail.
I think it's probably a few things.
Yeah.
She was in Congress for so long that she's earned the respect of a lot of her colleagues. And she's known for being able to bring people together and negotiate well. And she also has a really deep understanding of policy and knows how to use the legislative process to get things done.
So it's not just about who she knows.
Exactly.
But also her strategy and how well she understands the political system.
Exactly. It's all of that together that makes her so powerful.
Now, the article switches gears a bit and brings up something that I think is important to consider here.
Okay.
The attack on Paul Pelosi 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Nancy's husband.
Right. That was a horrible event.
It was.
It really shook everyone.
Yeah.
And it really reminds us of how dangerous things can be for public figures and their families, especially with how polarized everything is these days.
The article gives a short recap of what happened for anyone who might not remember all the details.
Okay.
A man broke into their home in San Francisco.
Right.
He was looking for Nancy. And he attacked Paul with a hammer.
It was terrifying.
It was.
Yeah.
And during the trial, they found out that the attacker was motivated by this extreme political rhetoric that's become so common.
Right.
He was completely caught up in these conspiracy theories and misinformation. And he saw Paul as a symbol of everything he hated about the so-called liberal elite.
Just a few months ago, he was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison.
Wow.
It's a clear message that violence like that will not be tolerated.
Yeah.
But the scars from something like that, they don't go away easily.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Both Nancy and Paul have been incredibly strong through all of this.
Yeah, they really have.
But it's impossible to imagine what that kind of experience does to your life and your sense of security.
Absolutely. This incident, along with the recent fall in Luxembourg, it really makes you think about how vulnerable people in public life are, especially as they get older.
Right.
They're often targets of anger and resentment and sometimes even violence, like we saw with Paul.
It's a scary reality. And it brings up some big questions about how we protect these figures.
Yeah.
How social media contributes to these extreme views and how we can make our political conversations more civil and respectful. These are things we really need to be talking about as a society.
I completely agree. We can't ignore these problems.
Now, before we go on to talk about the bigger picture of Pelosi's fall and compare it to other incidents involving older politicians, let's think for a minute about the psychological impact of all this on someone like Nancy Pelosi.
Right.
I mean, she spent her life in public service, and she's obviously faced a lot of challenges over the years. But, you know, these recent events, the attack on her husband and now her own fall, that's got to be a lot to deal with.
It really does make you wonder how someone keeps going after something like that.
Yeah.
You know, you were talking about how vulnerable older politicians can be. And it reminds me of what happened to Senator Mitch McConnell a few months ago when he fell in the Senate.
Yeah.
He's 82.
Right.
And he fell and sprained his wrist and cut his face.
Yeah.
And he even missed some votes because he was so stiff afterward.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We have these two incidents involving these really important figures from opposite sides of the aisle happening so close together.
Do you think this is a sign that we need to start talking more about how age affects our leaders?
I think so. These events are making us have a conversation about age and leadership.
Yeah.
And it's something that we don't usually talk about.
Right.
But we need to.
Yeah.
Because the average age of members of Congress is higher than it's ever been.
Oh, and more politicians are serving into their 70s and 80s.
It's great to have that experience and wisdom.
Oh, definitely.
But when things like this happen, it makes you wonder if they're up to the job physically and mentally.
It's a demanding job.
It really is.
Long hours. Travel all the time.
Right.
Constantly in the public eye.
Yeah.
And making tough decisions under a lot of pressure.
Exactly.
And as we age, our bodies and minds change.
Right.
It's just a fact of life.
So how do we balance the good things that come with experience with these worries about age and health and all that?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a complicated issue.
It is.
And there are good arguments on both sides.
Right. It's not about saying someone's too old to serve.
No. Definitely not. Or getting rid of experienced leaders. It's about being honest about the challenges of aging.
Okay.
And how those challenges affect someone's ability to do the job.
Right.
Maybe we need to think about providing more support for older politicians.
Okay.
Give them the resources and accommodations they need so they can serve effectively while also taking care of their health.
You're right. We have to remember that they're people too.
Exactly.
Not just politicians.
Yeah.
And they're going through the same aging process as everyone else.
And it's not just physical either.
What do you mean?
The emotional toll.
Oh, right.
It must be immense.
Yeah.
The pressure to always look strong and capable in public, especially after what happened to Paul.
Yeah.
We really need to create an environment where politicians feel comfortable asking for help.
Yeah.
No matter how old they are.
It's about making it okay to talk about mental health.
Exactly.
And understanding that getting help is a strength.
Yeah.
Not a weakness. And that needs to be true everywhere, not just in politics.
We need more compassion and support in general.
Definitely.
We need to remember that everyone, even our leaders, have challenges and struggles.
We need to be more understanding and empathetic about leadership.
Absolutely.
Where it's okay to be vulnerable.
Yes.
And asking for help is encouraged.
Exactly. And that actually benefits everyone.
How so?
Not just the leaders themselves, but also the people they represent.
Explain that.
When leaders take care of themselves, they can make better decisions.
Right.
They can work better with the people they represent. And they can inspire trust and confidence.
Now, thinking back to the attack on Paul Pelosi and connecting that to what we're talking about age and vulnerability, it makes you wonder if we're doing enough to protect our leaders.
That's a really important question.
Yeah.
And we need to take it seriously.
Definitely.
The attack on Paul was a wake-up call.
It was.
It showed us that the threats against our leaders and their families are real.
Yeah.
We need to make sure they have enough protection, and not just the people at the very top, but all elected officials and their families.
It's about recognizing that violence and threats have no place in a democracy.
Absolutely.
We have to condemn them completely.
Yeah.
And take real steps to prevent them. And it's not just the job of law enforcement and security.
No, it's all of us.
Right.
We all have to work together to create a culture of respect and civility.
Okay.
Where people can disagree,
right?
But violence is never the answer.
We need a political environment where it's okay to disagree and even debate.
Right.
But there are limits, and those limits need to be clear.
Definitely.
And if someone crosses those lines, they need to be held accountable.
And this brings us back to what we were saying about how social media can make things worse.
Right.
These platforms have to take responsibility for what people are posting and do something to stop the spread of misinformation and hate speech.
Right.
It's their duty to create spaces where people can have healthy debates.
Right.
And not encourage violence.
It's a tough balance.
It is.
Trying to protect free speech, but also making sure these platforms aren't used to spread dangerous things.
Right.
And it's not just the platforms themselves. It's all of us, too.
We have to be careful about what we believe.
Right.
And question the things we see online.
Yeah.
And speak up if we see misinformation or hate speech.
This is what it means to be media literate.
Exactly.
It's about learning how to navigate the media world and figure out what's biased.
Right? How to evaluate sources and form our own opinions.
These skills are so important nowadays.
More than ever.
Especially with how fast information and misinformation spread online.
You know, there's that saying.
Yeah.
A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes.
Right.
And that's more true now than ever before.
Absolutely.
And that's why shows like The Deep Dive are so important.
Right.
We want to give our listeners the tools and the mindset to be informed and engaged.
Okay.
And to really participate in these important conversations.
And not just sit back and watch.
So when it comes to Nancy Pelosi's fall, what are some things you think our listeners should remember as they see different versions of this story?
Well, first of all, remember that she's a real person who got hurt and deserves our compassion.
Exactly.
Whether we agree with her politically or not.
Don't fall for easy explanations that try to oversimplify things.
Yeah.
This is a complicated situation.
Yeah.
And it's not black and white.
And lastly, use this as a chance to think about the things we've been talking about. The pressure on public servants.
Right.
The challenges of aging and the need for civil discourse.
Yeah.
Especially in a divided country like ours.
Those are great points. It's so easy to get caught up in the news and the drama of it all.
Right. But we have to remember to take a step back.
Yeah.
Look at things critically and think about the bigger picture.
This reminds us that sometimes even things that seem small can have big consequences.
Right.
And force us to question things and have important conversations.
So as we move into the last part of our deep dive, let's talk about how the media is portraying all of this.
Right.
We've talked about how both sides have been supportive of Pelosi.
Yeah.
But we all know how it is. Different news outlets can really spin the same story in totally different ways.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The way this is being presented can have a big impact on how people see not just Pelosi herself, but all the issues we've been talking about. Edge political polarization, the vulnerability of public figures.
Yeah.
It's like a perfect example of why media literacy is so important.
Right. It makes you think, how are different outlets with their own biases and audiences going to present this? Are they going to focus on the human side of it, the concern that people are showing? Or will it just turn into another way to push a political agenda?
I'm sure we'll see a mix of everything.
Yeah, probably.
Some will focus on how strong Pelosi is. And the bipartisan support she's getting. Others might focus on her age. And whether she's still up to the job. And some might even use this to score political points.
It's a good reminder that we can't just accept everything we see in the headlines.
Oh, definitely not.
We have to really think about it.
We do. We need to remember that every story is told from a certain point of view with its own biases and priorities. And those might not be the same as ours.
So how do we navigate all of that, all these different versions of the same story?
The first step is being aware of our own biases. Because we all have them.
Yeah, of course.
They come from our experiences. Our values. Even the information we've been exposed to.
That makes sense.
Once we recognize our own biases, we can start to look at things more objectively. And then we have to question everything. Like, who's telling this story? Why are they telling it? What facts are they focusing on? And what are they leaving out?
And it's so important to look at multiple sources.
Oh, absolutely.
Different perspectives on the same event.
Yeah.
If you're only getting your news from one place, you're not getting the whole picture.
It's like trying to put a puzzle together. But you only have a few pieces. You need all of them to see the full image.
Makes sense.
And when you compare different reports and see how they frame the same facts, that's how you start to develop real media literacy.
It's like that quote.
What quote?
A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes.
Oh, yeah.
Seems especially true these days.
It does.
With how fast everything spreads online.
It's scary how fast things can go viral.
And that's what makes shows like The Deep Dive so important.
I think so.
We're trying to give our listeners the skills they need to really understand what they're seeing and hearing.
To be smart and critical about the information they're getting.
Exactly. So when it comes to Nancy Pelosi's fall, what are some key things you think our listeners should remember?
Well, first of all, don't forget the human side of things. This is a woman who got hurt. And we should feel empathy for her, no matter what our political views are. Second, don't fall for those simple explanations that try to make this whole situation seem easy to understand. It's not.
It's complicated.
It is. There's a lot more to it.
And lastly, use this event as a way to think more deeply about the stuff we've been talking about.
The pressure on our leaders, the challenges of getting older, the need for civil conversations, even when we disagree.
Those are really great points.
Thanks.
It's easy to get swept up in the news cycle, but we have to remember to step back. Think critically. And see the bigger picture.
It all comes down to this.
Okay.
We can use these deep dives, these looks into what seem like everyday events, to become more informed and engaged citizens.
That's a great way to put it.
The world needs people who are thoughtful, who question things, look for different perspectives, and are willing to have real conversations.
So well said.
Yeah.
And on that note, we want to wish Nancy Pelosi a speedy and full recovery.
Absolutely.
And we want to thank all of you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a great conversation.
It has.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic.
Can't wait.
But until then, keep questioning.
Yeah.
Keep learning.
Keep those brains working.
And keep diving deep.
See you next time.
Sound the alarm, I'm coming up. We'll have a ball, I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're Barbie doll, show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall, won't stop till